Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Just Mercy, starring Michael B. Jordan, Jamie Foxx, and Brie Larson, directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, whom I have seen his work. I have reviewed Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which he directed, and I have seen The Glass Castle, which movie I don't remember too well, but I think I kind of enjoyed it. So we'll see how this story goes, because I like this director, to be perfectly honest. Let's get into it. The story takes place in Alabama in 1987, where a worker named Walter McMillan, aka Johnny D, played by Jamie Foxx, which I don't get the name Johnny D at all, gets arrested for the murder of an 18-year-old white woman named Rhonda Morrison, and the arresting officer, Sheriff Tom Tate, takes him to jail while we move on to Jackson, Georgia in the year 1989. We get an idealistic Harvard Law graduate named Brian Stevenson, played by Michael B. Jordan, visiting a prisoner saying he's not at risk for death, while he's an intern while the guards beat up on the prisoner. And this is a sad opening, and unfortunately it happened back in the day, as it's unfortunately still happening now to this day. I hate to say it, but it's unfortunately true, because I'm not into slavery myself. That stuff's stupid to me. As 2 years later, Brian is moving to Alabama to become a lawyer, and his mother doesn't approve of him going to Alabama, and I really like the characters as they're very relatable, and the cinematography looks very good in this movie. Brian meets up with Eva Ansley, played by Brie Larson, arguing with a man who they were supposed to rent from because he doesn't want a law firm office, and they end up staying at Eva's house along with her husband Doug and son Chris, and Brian goes to a prison on his first day of being a lawyer as a guard asks to strip and search, which is so inappropriate in so many levels, as Brian doesn't seem too happy about it, and neither do I, which is complete harassment of the guard to strip a lawyer, and visits every single African American prisoner, including Herbert Richardson, Anthony Ray Hinton, played by Ice Cube's son, O'Shea Jackson Jr., and Walter, as Walter doesn't believe Brian will get him out, as he'll never get out of jail, which is a heartbreaking scene, a very heartbreaking scene, as this movie is very heartbreaking for not just myself, but to anyone viewing this movie, as well as every single African American who's been harassed by the cops. And the performances by every single actor in this movie is very good. Walter, Anthony, and Herbert hear some guard noises and turn up the music super loud to the point they don't want to hear another man screaming for their lives, while Brian investigates on Walter's case and finds the name Ralph Myers, played by Tim Blake Nelson, who testified against Walter, and visits the district attorney, and he gets non-stop suggestions about visiting a mockingbird museum in Alabama. And the dialogue is well written and well acted by the actors, in my opinion. Brian doesn't believe what the district attorney said about Walter's case, as he finds a building to rent out and takes a picture of it, and he goes to the home of the McMillan family, and they bring in a few neighbors to help out with the investigation, and he hears about what happened to when Rhonda was killed, and he was at home from day to night, and how much the cops put the family in death rows. And Brian figures out a way to bring Walter back home, and John's friend Darnell tells Brian about how someone named Bill, who testified against Walter, saying Bill didn't see anything. And I like the scenes as they're well shot, and the movie is working as a lawyer drama. Brian visits Walter and shows him some stuff, and Brian explains his origin and why he wanted to be a lawyer, which has something to do with his grandfather getting murdered by the cops. And Walter works with Brian on getting him out of jail, as Walter's wife, Minnie, gives Brian some photos to give to Walter, while Herbert is quiet because he's unfortunately going through death row, and he says he deserves what's coming for him, which is a tragic thing to say, while Anthony says he should be in the hospital instead of jail, while Eva and Brian gets a call from the protester saying Brian is making a mistake and threatens to put a bomb underneath Eva's house, and call the cops about the scary situation. And after the cops didn't find a bomb, they sit outside, and the actors Michael B. Jordan, Jamie Foxx, and Brie Larson are great in their roles. Brian and Eva ask some questions about the case against Walter, as they move in the new office and they interview for a secretary job and give it to Brenda, as Brian gets a call from Darnell while he was in jail for speaking the truth about telling Brian to find another witness, while Brian comes into the police station to speak with Sheriff Tate while the district attorney is in the room. And Sheriff Tate is led to believe without hard evidence Walter killed Rhonda and argue about it, and he sends a couple of deputies to go after Brian to harass him as well as pull out a gun. And the deputies in this town are kind of stupid for not just believing the wrong thing, but thinking they can stop a lawyer from helping a suspect who appears to be innocent. But we'll get there when I get to the end of the movie. But the relationships between characters are well done, and the movie does the whole convicting the wrong person and a lawyer helping out justice, in my opinion. Brian talks with Ralph Myers, aka the man that put him in jail, and the Tim Blake Nelson character about Walter and why he put him in prison, and he babbles about himself, and eventually Brian tells Ralph about how his testimony was a lie, and Ralph confesses he was lying on his testimony against Walter. And the scenes with Tim Blake Nelson did kind of annoy me, but he's a fine actor. Don't get me wrong. He's a fine actor. It's just his character that annoyed me, while Brian hears the tape of Ralph's testimony and believes he's lying in court, while Herbert is afraid for his life, while Walter calms him down. And that is the only heartwarming scene in this very heartbreaking movie. Brian, Eva, and Brenda fax a piece of paper and wait for a phone call about Herbert's death in the electric chair as he sees this tragic death. And I got flashbacks to when I first saw The Green Mile, I believe HBO many years ago, when they killed people in the electric chair and how sad it was. And while Walter and Anthony and the other prisoners make noise for Herbert. And the movie did make me cry when I first saw it in theaters. Yes, I did see this in theaters back in the day before COVID ever happened, because of the whole accusation against African Americans versus racist people, or cops, is unfortunately bringing it close to home for reasons I don't wish to bring up on the show, as Brian is in disbelief with the justice system, and sometimes that can be for reasons I won't get into. Brian revisits Ralph and tells him he doesn't want to frame an innocent man, and at some point he changed his mind and shows him his name on a list of framing Walter along with Sheriff Tate, and Ralph tells him why he went against Walter and says he'll testify against Sheriff Tate, which is pretty encouraging, as this movie has courage to tell the truth to the Justice Department. The court happens on April 16th, 1992, against Walter, beginning with Ralph going up to the court stand as he keeps looking at Sheriff Tate like he's going to kill him, until eventually Brian blocks Sheriff Tate from his view to get Ralph to tell the truth by saying his original testimony against Walter was not true, and Ralph tells Sheriff Tate that he can do what they want to him as long as Walter gets back home to his kids, and they interrogate every other witness against Sheriff Tate to free Walter, but the judge needs time to look over the information of the story, while a guard wants his family to come visit him by the car. And I usually have fun with the law movies that much that I was engaged with these scenes. 1 month later, Walter has to stay in prison to face death row on the electric chair until John tells the judge to not kill his family for no reason whatsoever, and gets arrested while Brian is upset about the decision, as Walter resists going in the jail cell, and the guards get him down and get some photos of his family. And I really want Walter to get out of the prison at this point in the movie, while Brian and Eva have a talk on a bench next to the lake, and Brian thinks in a church service and goes back to the jailhouse to tell Walter how sorry he is. And I like how effective this movie is to my heart, as any movie about an African American getting arrested or killed for no good reason just makes my heart break. Same goes with everybody that are Caucasian, Native Americans, and many different races, I'll say it best. I don't want anybody getting killed like that. I'm not that kind of person, as I feel bad for people that get harassed by others. Brian talks with the family and tells them they're working on getting the truth out as he goes to the TV story called 60 Minutes and take it to the Alabama Supreme Court, and 3 months later is ready to pick up, and they have a trial while Tommy Chapman postpones the court date while he has no other evidence, and we get to March 2nd, 1993, and Sheriff Tate's deputy holds all the African American people outside of the courtroom, which makes no sense in life, as the court session begins with the statement of the truth by Brian, and he fights for his family, and Tommy decides to dismiss the charges against Walter while Sheriff Tate is disappointed. And same goes with Rhonda's family, and Walter gets out of jail and says goodbye to his jailmates and comes home to his family thanks to Brian, and they work together as they become very good friends until Walter's death in 2013. And the movie ends with Brian helping out Anthony before he got killed by the electric chair, but decided to release him. And the climax was merciful, and this was a sad movie for sure, but it is a good film, and I'll explain why in a rating. I'll give this movie a 7.6 out of 10. The performances by every single actor in this movie is very good, while it was sometimes very heartbreaking, and the dialogue is well written and well acted by the actors, as well as the cinematography looking pretty good. The movie is well shot, and the movie works as a lawyer drama, and I believe they pulled off a court movie against different races for terrible reasons and flip it upside down justice, in my opinion. The movie is tragic at times, but at the same time, it's a good story. It's a good movie, but at the same time, tragic to see the whole justice system of African American people against racists is heading close to home. And if you don't support racism, as I don't, I recommend you see this movie, as it can happen in life, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, it's a good story to tell the audience about today. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review, and until then, let's serve some justice.